All right, call the June 28th meeting of the Wilmington School Committee to order. 6 members are present. Five members are present. MJ is going to be a little bit late. MJ Burns. We'll start with our first order of business as we do. At our last meeting, we were set to approve the middle school and high school handbooks. We entered into quite a lengthy discussion, which kind of took me off track, so I forgot to ask for a vote. So I would entertain a motion for approval of the middle school and the high school handbooks.
Make a motion to approve.
All right, do I have a second? Second from Tom. All in favor? All right. Unanimous of those members here. All right. Now we get into the business where I think more than likely our audience is here to help us through. We're going to initiate a discussion of our search for a new superintendent for the Wilmington Public Schools. In creating the agenda, my first thought was, I think that the first thing we want to look at is a consideration of using a search firm or posting and trying to find candidates on our own accord. Anybody have any input on that? Members?
Do we have to make a CO?
No, I haven't talked to any firms yet. I think we should make
Are they considered a firm? Are we considering them as a firm, or?
Yeah, they would certainly be in the consideration, I think, although
Because we talk, the price points are different, right?
yes, most definitely.
They as far, what I can remember is they help you through the process and guide you through the process, but they don't actually do
Identify
the searching
candidates.
and identify the candidates.
Correct.
If we talk to a search firm, they do a little bit more of the legwork.
Mhm.
So that's why the price difference, for the price difference is. So I think we need to have that information, right, as far as what the differences are in costs.
Do we have the information from the last time? I know we brought it up.
Right.
It was considerable difference.
There was, that's
Like
what I was trying to
3,000
make.
all the way up to like
Right.
25, and then some
Yeah,
numbers.
If I recall right, the top number was close to 25.
Right, and that's basically full service.
That is full service, yeah. Let's see.
Would come with a warranty.
Absolutely. They all come with a guarantee, and it's prorated depending on when a separation of ways would happen to occur. All right, on this comparison that I have from the last time it was done, I've got comparisons of firms, but no price points here. So that's something we would have to research. But from a philosophical standpoint, considering we were all, except for Jen, we were all in this room the last time when we made a decision to go on our own, philosophically, what's our thoughts at this one? I guess I'll start. Peggy, go ahead.
Steve, can I just say that because of my daughter working in the school system, I can do everything up until we get to the point of you determining who the superintendent is going to be and what the price what payment would be. So I can work on it now, but I just have to say it in public that that's as far as I can go.
Okay.
So that being said, I do definitely think we need to have some amount of outside help.
Okay. Jen, you had your hand up as well?
Sure, so the comparison, where is that? Do we have that? Is that from the last?
That's from the last one.
Can I get that?
Sure.
And then can you tell me the firms that you
Yep.
were looking at?
The firms that were looked at last time were NESDEC, MASC, and Future Management Systems.
And do I have to raise my hand here, or do I?
No,
in the
it's a workshop. It's a
style? How does
workshop.
that work? Okay.
Yeah.
Would we only be looking at those, or would we be looking at some others?
Well, this is from 4 years ago, so I think we certainly want to expand and see if there are other firms
So
that
then the
are.
question is philosophically, how do we feel about
Yeah.
it? And then go from there. I think once we say one way or another, then we start getting more specific on firms that we look at based on cost, based on services, based on.
I think we definitely need to go with a firm, but I think we need to be really careful which one we choose and why we're choosing it, and to make sure that we're getting that they're looking for what we are saying we want, not pulling people in that. So I think it's good in some ways, but it can also be a little bit dangerous in other ways, because they're headhunters, some essentially, right? They're pulling people in, and so it doesn't give you the same authenticity of doing it ourselves with our own search.
Authenticity, can you tell me what you mean by that?
Meaning, we're getting all of the resumes with the search committee that we develop. We are then saying, okay, here's our rubric, we're all taking every single resume, we're looking through it, we're saying, we're scoring it. We're having more, we actually really see it, as opposed to
We
only
really
seeing
can't
it
do that as a
at
school
the end,
committee.
but the search committee can.
Right.
Right, which may or may not be, they may not see the full piece. It just changes it a bit. I think that it's the way to go, but I think we need to be clear that it is also a firm that's pulling things in for us too.
Yep, devil's advocate on that. If the firm is reputable, as I assume they would be,
Yeah.
they're gonna find candidates that would not necessarily apply.
Right, which is why I think it's important to go with the firm, because they might be able to say, oh, I know this one in Stoneham is thinking about this, and right, for sure.
Yeah, I'm of the mind, I think we should definitely employ a full-service agency.
Didn't we do that the last time?
When, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
No, we hired MASC, which basically, that's the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. They basically guided us through the process, but it was up to us to find the candidates.
Yeah, they provide a small service, like they put an ad out there, and they did guide us through the process. They did know some people, so they gave us some advice on who to talk to. But they weren't a recruiter. They didn't take full charge of the recruiting process. I mean, as far as candidates, the last time using MAC, the process worked out, right? But it was a lot of work on our part. We put a lot of time into that, and we're obviously willing to put in the time to get the right candidate, but having professional help certainly be something that we could use.
I also think the landscape was a little different 4 years
Yeah.
ago as far as the number of openings in Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
And the number of candidates that are qualified and willing to send in blind resumes to do a school system. So that being said, I think philosophically, we are of the mind that we'd like to employ a search firm. Certainly, we wouldn't take a vote in a workshop, but am I correct in the consensus being that? All right, so our next step in that would be some researching some firms. Yep.
Are we going to have audience participation, because do we want to go at each level, or do we want to add it afterwards?
Well, no, I think we go at each level. That's a good point, Pete. Does anybody have input regarding the using a search firm or not? Or does anybody have any experience with using a search firm for a superintendent search? Is anybody in the audience, let me ask you, anybody in the audience been involved in superintendent search or any other systems? All right. Does anybody have any input one way or another on this topic? Yes?
I have a question. As far as using a service, have you guys reached out to other schools that have used these services to help them hire someone? And just to see what their opinion was on different services, companies?
Speaking only for myself, I certainly haven't reached out to anybody, but looking through, reading the news, Ipswich had a successful search, and they used a search firm to do that. And depending on what we decided here tonight, my intention was to call the chairman of the school committee there, find out what their experience was. That would be part of my research for the search committee.
I think some of the search services that we had last time were actually recommended by schools that we reached out to a few years ago.
That have a good retention rate of who they've hired.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would, when we ask for, I'm sure we'll ask for RFPs, and I'm sure that would be part of that criteria.
Thank you.
But a great point. Thank you. Any other discussion on this? All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is Proposed timeline, which is going to be an interesting thing to do this early in the game, but I think it's important that we, at the very least, talk about some of the things that we want to do leading up to it, including surveys. So I thought we might do this on the whiteboards. Anybody have handwriting they're proud of?
Absolutely not.
Anybody? There's some teachers here. You guys must write on the chalkboard all the time. All right. So, one of the things that I think is going to be important is starting out the process, regardless of which firm we choose. I think we want to start out the process by starting to gather data from residents, school teachers, school administration, and community stakeholders. So I'm thinking that the best time to probably do that, when people's minds are of that, would be in early September. See, this is why I didn't want to write.
All right, I'll do it.
Thank you, Jack, I appreciate it. You just couldn't stand watching it, right?
He did that on purpose so somebody else
It's a
would.
Sharpie.
Hey, look at all these chunky markers here.
Yeah, I'm chunky enough. So, all right,
Start
so
over?
early, yeah, let's start over.
Sorry.
This is gonna be on TV, right? I just wanna make sure my humiliation is
No,
completely
I'm trying to
public.
help, I'm just trying to help. All right.
Oh, now that's nice.
Surveys, early September parents.
Early September for a timeline.
Now, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
If we're going with a firm, that they would do pieces of this, I would imagine.
Is that part of their,
That would be, and the ones I've
So-
the ones I've looked at online in different districts, it's sort of a
They'll
full
conduct it.
pack- They
but
they
do
work with
we,
everybody to figure out what to ask and all of those things.
so they'll create the survey?
They
Do we
could.
guide them as to who
Yes.
we wanna poll?
What are the surveys for? What exactly will we be asking in the survey?
Well, I think we've asked, what people are looking for in a superintendent, what's
So my
important
question
in a
is,
superintendent.
we went through this process not so long ago. Don't we have already a starting point of what we're looking for?
I thought we had pretty much an outline.
Yeah, an
of exactly
outline,
what we're
yeah.
Looking for, and I don't
I,
see,
Well,
I mean, because most surveys, they don't, people don't even respond.
all right, so we started the process. We had resumes. We didn't get the candidates that we're looking
we
for.
haven't done any survey.
No,
Which
but
I
we had
think is an
the,
important step, personally. So this is the job description for superintendent that we posted 4 years ago, well, that was created several years ago.
do we have one from 2 months ago, 3 months ago, when we
That
started
we
the
have the
process?
posting. We don't have the full job description. Does anybody want to see this? Let's say one for MJ. Got a couple if anybody wants to see. Yep. So this is a survey that we've done 4 years ago, which asks all kinds of questions about educational leadership skills, curriculum development, instruction, school-based technology. So there's, we've got a template to start with.
we develop that?
I believe this was developed by MASC. But Peggy would know, or Manny, do you know who
I think it
developed
was,
it?
I think it was AMSC that
Yes, it was.
they sent it out, Mike Gilbert had given it to us. I'm pretty sure it was, seems like it was a long time ago.
A lifetime ago.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was.
How many people was it sent out to?
So,
The schools.
I think it was sent out to,
We have 3,400.
all parents in the school system.
So,
Emails, it was email, and we did get, I don't remember what the response was. I don't know what the percentage was, but we got some response out of it. I don't remember quite what we did with those responses, if we created any guidelines for it, or, you know, it's, said it seems like it was a long time ago.
so we had 461 people, 461 parents respond to that 4 years ago.
3,400 students.
Some of them multiple. I'm not, I mean, I think you got a point, but that's still, I mean,
That's actually pretty high.
yeah,
I
it's a
think-
decent
I
percentage.
think-
For what you're asking, and what you,
Yeah, I mean,
what you can expect,
that's-
that's not a bad percentage. And I would venture to guess it'll be higher this time.
Put it on Facebook, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's certainly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's hope-
Facebook,
One
Talk about nice.
I don't
I
think
thought
we
we
would
were
put it on
taking up
Facebook,
the-
yeah,
but-
but we certainly put it on the school website,
Kind of,
get it.
kind of like.
advertise it on Facebook.
Sorry.
Snapchat.
I think like maybe not just focusing on the email though as well, it just as a, you know, everybody in this room probably gets multiple emails a day, that there really has to be promotion of
Yep.
people
Maybe, yeah.
understanding how important, maybe even an open house, you ask them to do it before. I mean,
Was that done the last time? I get the feeling it was, wasn't it?
The last time he did, Mike Gilbert, it was Mike Gilbert, right? He did meet with parents and teachers separately, and he held those a number of different nights. And brought back what he thought were his like top 5 or 10 points from meeting with everybody.
And that was prior to the candidates, right?
It was prior
Yeah.
to the candidates, yes. And, I mean, the feeling I got from those meetings were that he pulled what he wanted to out of that meetings and didn't necessarily hear 100% what everybody was saying. But I do feel like people were given the chance to voice their opinions at all those meetings.
How was the attendance on that, Joe?
I thought parent-wise, pretty good.
Yeah? Okay. Community folks, great. Media, we'll put it,
Social media.
well, how about regular media too?
The media.
Sarah, what other kind of outreach can we do for these surveys? Anybody? Anybody? Yes, sir?
I suggest that a good search firm will do focus groups with constituents, and I think if you put out a survey and triangulate it with the focus groups, you'll have a pretty good indicator of themes that start to be teased out.
Yeah, that was something that I read. I wasn't part of this the last time we did a search, but reading the documents that Julie forwarded to me, there were some focus groups done, right? Yeah.
And I don't, maybe change that to forums, you know, not like selecting people, but just announcing on that evening,
Uh-huh.
search firm will be here to take your input regarding qualities and characteristics of superintendent.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm just gonna, one of the other districts that's recently hired a superintendent, they did, focus groups and interviews were held with a broad range of internal and external stakeholders. To gather perspectives about the qualities desired in the new superintendent and the issues that he or she may face in the first years on the job. Between middle of December, and then January 7th, 15 sessions were scheduled for community partners and town agencies, and 19 sessions were scheduled for school and district staff to meet with the consulting group to contribute their thoughts. So a short time period, but they
Right.
gathered a ton of data during that time. And then they had an online survey following that, so they had those first, and they had an online survey, which was only open for 1 month. And they had a pretty good return rate, like similar to ours,
Okay, great. Which district was that, out of curiosity?
Brooklyn.
All right, so early September, we want to start our surveys, get them out when school is starting back up, so people have this on their mind. I would think that also by early September, we will have identified as the search firm.
You have to identify a search firm now.
Well-
It has to be, I'd say, within the next month. Because if you're gonna start employing a search firm, you need to give them what your requirements are, what you're looking for in a superintendent, what you believe the town is looking for, what our parameters are, what our district is, what our students are. This search firm is going to be requesting a ton of information, and we need to identify who we're gonna hire. This is not something that can wait a couple months. This is something that has to be done fairly immediately, if we're gonna be looking at September.
Well, we're looking in September to gather our data.
And you're talking, but the search firm is gonna be looking at, you can't expect the search firm to put this up in September. They're gonna need time to put things together.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Actually, I see what you're saying. Okay.
They're gonna need at least a
They're going
month.
to be creating the surveys. That's a good point. Okay.
And I'd expect a search firm to put together a website for us. I'd expect them to do the minimum of, to do most of the work on this. I mean, if you're gonna pay them, I expect them to do the work. And that includes the social media, that includes putting all this together. And, I mean, I agree that a search firm is necessary, but I also think that with a search firm, there has to be a lot of input from parents, from administrators, from teachers, to identify what we're looking for. And that needs to start, that process needs to start now, if we're gonna do this, by September.
So my only, I agree it's urgent and we need to, but I also think we're in the summer months where it's going to be very difficult to get teachers' input and all of those pieces.
That's why
I think
September may not be if you're
may
gonna
not be
do a search
reasonable, so
firm,
I'm thinking
it's
if
not
we're
feasible.
identifying the search firm August, September,
Yes.
more likely this is happening a bit later. And for typical searches,
October.
this stuff wouldn't really, I mean, when I've seen other searches in other districts, they're not usually doing this stuff until probably November, December.
That's
Like
why
it's
the
sort of a
search-
little bit later, but
That's why the September survey, it's
Isn't
not necessarily feasible
ambitious.
with a search firm, especially with summer, unless we're looking at bringing people in summer, which, I mean, people may be willing to get this done. But if we're looking at starting up the actual process of getting the search firm involved, we're looking more at surveys, I'd say, mid-October, early November.
Okay.
That's what I think is feasible for this.
I appreciate that input.
Steve?
Yeah.
I just want to say that before you spoke, I was going to say that we should put search firm first on the list, because that's the thing we have to do first. But we did interviews with those search firms. They came with their proposals for how to do this. So I don't see that it would be a problem to have the interviews for the search firm in the summer. I think that's what we have to do. But we also have to be careful, it's been said a few times here, if the search firm knows us too well in some respects as our community, they're carrying their biases about what we want with them to this, and they are able to take, like you said, took some information that maybe not all of the information that we would have liked to see. So I think that it wouldn't bother me either to see a search firm who has not worked with us in the past.
Yeah.
So I'll just, because I just think, it's not that you're prejudiced, but you think you know what's best and you can really help the group, and sometimes it's better to just come at it. And I think the other thing is, if we don't have this in place, how many other communities, because there are 50 or more
Right.
superintendent vacancies, how many other communities are gonna have theirs in place? So I really think it's important that we do this summer.
So one of the reasons we picked MASC last time was 100% because of cost, right?
Yep. It was the cost.
And we looked at other recruiting services, and obviously the more services they provide, and it's gonna go way up. So I'm all for hiring someone that will help us through the process, and get the surveys done, get social media, all that. One of the things we need to talk about is do we have a budget for that? What is that budget? What are we looking at? So, because it was a big difference last year. I think MASC was cheap money,
Like 15,000 or something.
something like that, maybe less.
Yeah.
And I think there was another one in New Hampshire that we looked at that was 35, 40,000.
Yeah.
So there's a big, and that was 4 years ago, so that's gonna obviously be more, so.
We didn't have a human resources person then.
We did
have
not,
one
so
now,
that's someone that we can, have as a point person looking for, or researching,
He probably should be.
one of the things that we need to do is figure out what do we need this service to do? What are the services that we really need? And we have to make a list and prioritize what is, must-haves and what's be nice to have, and then have our human resource person kind of search for that recruiter. And you're absolutely right, the sooner we get started, the sooner we can,
One additional question.
yeah.
I know that we're leaning towards the search firm, and I think that that is the correct way to go. Are we envisioning some sort of committee along with that?
I would imagine that we have a committee that, the superintendent search committee, that's gonna work with the recruiting service.
I'm just trying to envision how.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we
how
wouldn't-
we're gonna work this.
I don't think we would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we just would hire a recruiting service and let them go.
No, and I agree.
So we would,
But when we're putting together the qualifications for this search committee to look at, shouldn't we have the search committee ready providing that information? And if that's gonna be in the summer, shouldn't we have the search committee ready to go in the summer if we're gonna be hiring them in the summer?
I mean,
Just
we're not gonna
saying.
be hiring in the summer.
Yeah, we're-
Just bringing it up.
But we're not gonna be, this person won't even start until
I
June.
mean, we're looking search
Next
firm,
year.
finalizing by September. Finalizing by September, shouldn't we have the parameters of the search committee ready to
the
give them
parameters
what
for
focus was
the,
to
I'm
begin?
sorry,
Yeah,
parameters for the search committee or
No,
parameters
I'm
for
talking
the?
about, shouldn't the search committee be the ones providing the search firm with what we are looking for in the superintendent, if they are the search committee? And if we're getting the search firm by September, wouldn't you have to have the search committee up and running by September?
So I think I'm getting a little
you're
confused.
talking about selection.
Yeah.
It's the selection committee, yes, the selection committee.
Okay,
So,
You have a selection committee, and that selection committee, I'm assuming, is the one who are gonna put together all of the qualifications, all of what we're looking for, all of the documents that are necessary to put this together.
and part of getting that information is having the surveys, right? We can't do one before the other. So we have to find the search firm, and that search firm is gonna help us put together the survey to get those qualifications that we're looking for. So we kind of have to take step by step on doing
Who's
that.
hiring the search firm?
Who's hiring?
The search, is the school committee gonna be solely responsible for the search
Correct.
firm?
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's all I want to know.
yeah, and what they did 4 years ago was they interviewed several firms publicly.
Okay.
Which is what we do again this time, I'm sure.
Perfect.
All right, where were we?
Search firm.
Yeah, so, all right. So the idea of, okay, actually, we're still in timeline. So we've got to put our first priority on selecting a search firm, which we would like to get done in July. So we've got to put up RFPs, yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting. I think Mrs. Broussard had done some research back in January when we initially tried to undertake it by ourselves, and we had came from a decision. I think that she did research some of those, and I think that may help us bode well for that homework may have been done. There's not a lot of firms out there, especially 4 years ago. I'm a little familiar with that experience, and I still recall that I think there was 3 firms that we found were reasonable in this area that had a good reputation with regards to finding
Yeah,
candidates.
We actually went through that before you were.
Forgive me, I'm so
That's okay.
sorry.
That's all right.
Guide me, I'm sorry, not to, all right,
No
I'll
problem.
let you go.
Not a problem, don't worry.
Sorry, I apologize for being late.
So, and we did, before you arrived, we did come to a consensus that we do want to employ a search firm this time around.
Very good. I'm in agreement with that.
Good, very good. All right.
And Steve, we'd have to know what our budget is and before we, I would imagine, right, start.
And it goes back to what are the qualifications of the search firm that, what are the services that we're looking for that search firm? So it goes back to, do we want the search firm to conduct the surveys, to conduct the focus groups, to do the social media? So those are the qualifications we need to figure out that we want and that we're able to budget for.
I think there's another piece to that matter, too, with regards to, I don't think this is the proper term, but like a fallout clause, if in the search, if we, worst case scenario, don't find a candidate to meet our needs in the district, I'd be interested, I think one of the other criteria is what happens if we do have to, it's a what if, a backup plan B. What financial responsibilities, if we don't find the candidate in the first search piece. Will they conduct another search, and if so, if that costs us money, or if it doesn't, or if there's a timeline in which we do hire somebody, it doesn't work out. I know at the last firm we dealt with MASC, there was a small clause in that aspect if it shouldn't work out the first go-around. That's something financially we have to kind of, I think, factor in as well, or look at the flexibility as when we do search for firms. Just as a side note.
Okay. All right. So, on the further aspects of the timeline, we do have to, so now we also have to put together a selection committee. The last time, you still with us?
Yes, sorry.
So,
I don't know what you're asking, you want to ask?
I was just thinking while we're sitting here, I don't know if you can go online and just get a list of superintendent search companies.
Well, I think
To help
we've
us,
agreed on a search firm, so now the next step will be, and Steve, do you do that, or are you the one who
I
starts?
actually think it's a great idea to have Ken do that.
Okay,
I think that's what his job is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
Oh, okay.
So we had a selection committee the last 4 years ago, and according to the notes sent to me, we had, involved in that was here we go.
Can I ask a question, Steve?
Yeah.
When you say search committee,
So, did I say search? I meant selection.
okay, I know that we hired the firm first. And then they were the ones who gave us that timeline. And then we created the search where you had a body of, I think it was, I wanna say 13, which was, I think, the max number. Do the interview process. Is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
Okay.
So I think we should, I think it makes sense for us to come up with an idea of who we want on that selection committee. As far as the stakeholders, I certainly think we want teachers. Thank you, Jen.
Sorry, is that my cue?
Selection, yeah, that'd be great. Selection committee. So the max was 13. That's an awful big number. And from what I understand, in talking to people that were there, the biggest problem was getting everybody into the same room for all 3 or all 5 or all 9 interviews or however many they had.
We had 3 nights, consecutive nights.
Yeah.
part of that criteria when we did do a reach out, because Julie really drove the last search and worked with MASC directly. We did reach out from the Roman House and through committee's connections who may participate, parents, someone from the town hall,
Teachers, parents.
teachers. We had Paul Ruggiero sat on that search. We had one school committee
Roman
member.
House. Or central office, however you want to put that. So hold
Representative.
on one
I'm
second.
sorry.
Jane.
Remember?
So teachers, parents, Roman House,
School committee.
no, I don't think, we don't want a school committee on
I
that.
had one school committee member on that.
We had, I was the one who went through that process.
Yeah, I think I've heard some advice against having a school committee member on that.
I've heard that is,
You have to have a school committee member, per the advisory.
On the
committee.
selection committee?
You have to have it under an advisory committee, you have to have a school committee member.
well, that's,
One.
I think that's why we had one.
I thought we advised against it. That's
we
what I
were,
heard.
there's no right or wrong, it's the determination of the board in that process. There's pros and cons to that piece. I like that, I participated fully from beginning of the search last year to the end, and I think, I saw no issues arise from that piece. And I think that's kind of why you have a selection committee, because you get it from perspectives from all different areas. We had at-large resident who had no affiliation with the school or the town directly, that was another stakeholder that was named. We had selectmen, Mike Newhouse, I think, was one of them. We had, and then we just had, I guess, I know John Eaton, I don't know if it was the finance committee he was there for, or if he was just requested, I'm not sure what capacity, but,
I think he was at large, because I'm not sure if he was on the finance committee 4 years ago.
okay, then we did have at-large business holders. And
So,
Is 13 a lot?
it's on the
seems a
higher
little-
end.
Yeah.
I have to say, it can be, when you whittle down to the top 5, I think it was well organized, and I think that's where the firm comes in really handy. Discussion doesn't ensue. 13 is a little bit of a large number, because we had a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders in town. We still do.
we've got a pretty diverse group right here. Is there anybody that has any other ideas of people that should be included in the selection committee?
Steve, I think you're right. I don't think school committee members can be on it.
Forgive me for this, but didn't you say by law they had to be?
No, I was looking at another.
There's no, it is a.
Under your advisory committee guidelines, you can appoint whoever you want. However, it appears that committee members should not be on it.
And that's what I thought I had been advised.
And I would say that it looks as though you shouldn't be on it. Because the committee is advising, the whole point of the advisory committee, according to this, is to advise the school committee. If you have a school committee member on it, you're technically not advising the school committee at that point. And that's where the conflict comes in.
Dave, can I ask you a question? What are you referring,
I'm referring to your rules and regulations of forming advisory committees.
Your being Wilmington's?
No, the school committees.
The school committee.
it's not an advisory committee, it's a search committee, which is a little different.
No, this would be technically an advisory committee. It has to be an advisory committee.
It's a
because there's only so many things you can do, and this would be, there is no search committee under your guidelines. It has to be an advisory committee.
I would like to look into that only because MASC did the last search with us, and I know that they're very regimented with it. It's my understanding, and I'd be happy to look into it to see if there's any newer things that have transpired since that lapse. I mean, it's the will of the board, but because it's a search, and I think you raise a good point.
The board only has so many ways you can appoint a committee, and this is how your regulations allow you to appoint a committee. I mean, and if it's not this, there is no thing called a search committee in your rules. It has to be an advisory committee. And technically, you can't appoint it. It has to be the superintendent. has to make the recommendation.
Why?
So the superintendent has to be the one to recommend
No.
it.
No.
That's not correct.
Okay.
The school
Then I-
co-
then
we
I'm- then I'm
oversee the
confused,
superintendent.
Because it says, will be made by the school committee upon recommendation of the superintendent.
No, see, this is a selection committee that we're choosing to have. We really don't have to have
This
one.
isn't- this-
You know, it's
I
one of the.
agree you don't have to have one, but I'm just saying, I
It's,
don't know
it's,
what
it's not
other
this, but
that you
what
would
I'm
have.
trying to clarify, Dave, it's not the same, it's not a subcommittee. It's a
Yeah.
selection committee.
You know what
It's,
I'm saying,
there's a,
this is not a subcommittee. I'm not sure what committee
the
you're
advisory
appointing.
committee is in that role,
It was
because,
a selection committee, selection group that we put together last time, and Mike Gilbert did advise us, and he said that we can have one person.
And if you could show
From the school
me,
committee.
if you could show me where the selection committee rules are that allow me to do this, I'd be more than happy to see, because
it's
I
not
reviewed
under
your
policy
guidelines.
as opposed to the jurisdiction of school committees in the state of Massachusetts, I believe.
I mean, ultimately, last time, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a committee, there were all these different stakeholders were on it. They made a recommendation, but ultimately, it's the school committee who makes the final decision, which is what happened,
Right.
ultimately what happened last time.
And
Again,
before
correct me
that,
if I'm wrong.
we actually had a subcommittee,
Yeah,
before we even had that selection committee.
but ultimately, isn't that committee, we call it a selection committee, but the committee's not making the selection, ultimately, you guys are. So ultimately, doesn't that make it advisory? If it is in fact advising you, we think you should select this person? I'm not saying that doesn't mean we shouldn't have a member of the school committee on it. I'm simply saying that last time, the selection committee, or whatever you want to call them, the advisory committee, they made a suggestion, but ultimately it was the school committee who made the final decision.
Well, as far as suggestion, you narrowed it down to finalists. You didn't necessarily give it.
I wasn't on it.
Okay.
It was
Yeah,
4
they-
years
they
ago. I
didn't
went and
select-
met all the superintendent candidates, but I mean, at the end of the day, there still was a favorite. I don't know who it was, but it's still the school committee who makes the final point. So my point in kind of in joining in here is that if it is gonna serve in that way, ultimately advising whether it's the final three or the final one, it is technically an advisory committee.
Can I make?
So, well, how do we want that to look?
Although
No,
you've
but-
got, the selection committee has more jurisdiction than an advisory committee. An advisory committee is simply going to advise. The selection committee narrows it down. They actually take certain candidates and throw them out of the race. So that's more jurisdiction than an advisory committee.
And the other aspect is with other hires within the district that the superintendent has jurisdiction over and control over, it's the superintendent that dictates that selection committee, not, as opposed to as an advisory committee. It's not apples to apples, but I understand where I understand where the, I would like to go back to MASC and get more clarity over to the distinction of the two. Again, it was 4 years ago, so the clarity behind it, because that did come up, previously, not under that note.
All I'm saying is that there are subcommittees listed here, there are advisory committees listed here. If we're going to have a committee, and I understand you guys did a search committee last time, I can't find anywhere in the rules of bylaws of your rules and bylaws that say a search committee. It's an advisory committee.
The thing is, you wouldn't find it under policy, because this is not something that would be necessarily a district policy, because it's selection of a superintendent. There's the state protocols that we follow in that selection.
Okay.
It's not something that boards would create policy on within the district, because you don't, yes, we do hire, but that might be something to look further into. But again, like I said, I'd be happy to take your email. Anybody who's interested, I'd be happy to get the clarity behind it, because I know that there was a point discussed for.
So, and I'll go back to what I said a few months ago. Do we really need a committee like we had last time? Because last time, I wasn't 100% happy how it went down with having that selection committee. And that was for the school committee taking control of the hiring process, as we should, for that. So that's
Well,
something we need to talk about
Can I
as
just
well.
clarify, what parts of that selection committee were you, I'm just curious.
During the process, we were getting a lot of calls from a lot of different people, and I thought a lot of it was just not necessary. I thought a lot of it was pushing us towards certain candidates during the process, before the process was over, before we got to the different finalists. And it wasn't something that I was crazy about, and we had talked about it a few months ago when we were going through the process, and we went back and forth whether we did need that selection committee, and at this point, I can go either way, but I really want to make sure that we're making the right decision for the right reasons.
I think however we set it up, or whatever the determining factor is, I think it's important to include stakeholders in at least the initial interview process. As to what that looks like, as to how many people that looks like, you know, that's just my general thing. I get it. I understood, and I went through the 3 hours, 3 consecutive nights of interviewing. It's tedious, but it was a good experience. You know, whether we decide to do that again this year, I really don't have an opinion of, but I do think that stakeholders from different areas of the town should have that role, because it does impact the town as a whole.
I certainly have an opinion. I heard what you said a couple months ago, and I think I was of the same mind at the time, but over time I've decided, I personally think we need to have as many stakeholders involved in the initial process as possible.
I think you have a very engaged citizenry at all different levels, parents, teachers, community members, as a result of what happened last time. I think that not listening would be a tremendous mistake, and ultimately, you know, would cause some confidence to be lost. Now, with that said, I think you want it organized. You talked about calls you were getting. I think if the search committee is organized and well represented of this district,
And provided guidelines.
and provided guidelines, the chain of, you know, that is a chain of command. They're gonna come to these meetings, you have those conversations there. They can't stop you from calling you, especially when you're friends with these people, they're your colleagues. But I think that having stakeholders in this and listening to stakeholders, I'm a teacher and a parent in the district. I think people really need to hear these things. You guys really need to hear what the people are saying. So whether it's a search committee through the whole entire process, that's gonna be very important, I think, going forward.
Just as a little further clarification, what occurs is once we have candidates to serve on the selection committee is what it comes down to. An orientation is usually done, explaining the do's and don'ts. Nothing can be discussed. You can't mention anything about the candidates you see, can't mention anything about the resumes you see, it's an all executive session. They form a group, so no one knows who is applying for these positions. So it's granted, I don't think everybody's gonna be up, I'm sure we're gonna get calls. But I think that survey is gonna be a huge piece into part of the people wanting to be here as to what they want and what they're looking for, and I think it'll all work. I will have to say the process last time worked well. You know, it wasn't the process worked well. It was very well structured, and I think it was, Julie did a bang-up job, but the process itself went well. There was nothing wrong that I saw with the process, as to how we went through the process of hiring in the last.
Steve, talking about the stakeholders, I couldn't see if we had school administrators on the list. I see that we had teachers,
Yeah,
we
great
had
point.
central office staff, but I'm sure
Thought
we
about
had
that
at least
too.
one principal
I think you're right, there was.
or school administrator.
You know, and I'm looking at the department website, and it doesn't really refer to it as a selection committee, that the school committee is selecting, so it's more of a screening.
Okay.
They're screening, they're not.
That's exactly what it was. It was
Yep.
screening candidates and bringing it down to 3.
I think, and that we make the determination as to how many applicants we want be brought forth. If there are that many to bring forth.
And how many, was it 10 or 11 that they originally met with?
I'm sorry?
How many candidates were there? Was it 10, 11?
I'd say close to 10. I think we saw, the interviews were an hour each night, and they lasted about 3 hours.
And
We had-
that was screened down and went down to 3 candidates that we met with afterwards.
Right, on the last evening, 'cause it was decided we wanted to finish up on that night, as opposed to going into another night of deliberation. We all wrote down our top 3, and then Mike Gilbert did all the list, like similar to that, as to how many each got, and that determined.
And those 10 candidates were screened by Mike Gilbert, MASC?
The way we got the applicants, he did weed out a lot of applicants that he received for the position. A lot of them were out of state. A lot of them didn't have licensure. A lot of them he felt were not appropriate for the Wilmington district, for whatever reasons was not disclosed to us. And so he brought forth however many that he felt were consideration.
That was part of the service that they provided.
That was part of the service. But with MASC too, they kind of have the pulse on the thumb with regards to, people, MASs, their connections with MAS. They're familiar with who's looking where, and if they are looking in other districts as well. Whether it's just a one, like Wilmington's got an opening, Wilmington's all I want, as opposed to shopping. And that was helpful. I felt very helpful in the process because it cut out that red tape of, do they really want to be in Wilmington, or are they just looking to use this as a stepping stone? You know what I mean, to another district. And I've been watching and Googling a lot of, especially since I knew we were approaching this, just doing a lot of Google searches on superintendent searches and stuff. And there's a lot of names that do come up a couple of times over the past 5-6 years in different districts, taking different positions. I do get leery, but I don't want to pass judgment because I don't know what the circumstances are in those changes. Whether they want, they're looking for a different type of district, whether it be regional, whether it be larger, whether it be smaller. I don't want to even speculate, but having someone who is familiar with certain, individuals was helpful. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I found it to be helpful to narrow and focus on those that could be actual viable candidates. That was my personal experience.
What services did MASC actually provide? What were the services that they actually provided to the schools?
So they were more of an advisory type service where they put an ad.
We had they
did the search for the
They
candidates.
did a proposal to us as well. It was a formal proposal. They interviewed on a lot of, School Spring was one, and there was a couple of other educational job sites. They ran that.
They screened the candidates.
Right, they took in the applications, waited through any dead weight. He came in, they did our orientation. He ran the 3 evenings for the selection committee.
They pretty much advised us on the process of how we put the search committee, the district visits, even to some of the questions that we should be asking at the interview process.
Exactly.
I mean, they put us through that process, helped us out, but they did not do the search themselves.
Yeah.
They were more of an advisory
You
type
did
service.
have focus groups too for both the parents and the teachers.
Right, that was part of the yeah.
We did a pamphlet flyer.
Yeah,
that
that
we
was a
handed
big,
out.
there was a huge piece, very helpful piece.
And, they were there for questions, and anytime we had questions, we called them, they came in.
Were we satisfied with their service?
For the cost, yes. Could we have had better services and more services? Do we want more services at this point? Probably, but that's where that budget question comes in. There are must-haves as far as services, there are nice-to-haves, and the more services you're getting from these companies, the more you have to pay. MASC gave us the minimum, but gave us what we needed at the time.
And did we find a superintendent who was, besides the obvious issues, somebody who would have served this town well?
That person went through a vetting process of a 13-person selection committee, and then went through the interview process, site visits, and in every way.
Besides the issue, do we feel she did an adequate job? Do we feel she did a good job?
But that's,
We're not here.
we're not,
Yeah.
We're not
No,
here.
I'm just saying, did we hire somebody who we thought did a good job?
The process
That's not why
was.
we're here this evening, and
Oh, but if they.
We
if
hired
MASC
someone that we
provided
felt
service
at the
that was good,
time
Why don't we
would-
just hire them again?
well, the hiring decision was
Oh, you
made at
mean-
the time, what we thought was the best candidate put forward. But we can't answer your question,
I'm just saying, MASC seemed to have done a good job, so why don't we just go with them again?
I'm sure that they would be in consideration, but I think just to be thorough and diligent, I think I'd like to see what has changed in the 4 years, and if there's any other services that may provide us more bang for our bucks and still give us the same quality service.
Okay.
And I think, when you're dealing with, we're talking about up to $25,000 to
Or more.
conduct this, or more, to conduct this search with a firm. We want to get as much services and much support in this process you know, that we can, but we also have to be diligent that, you know, we're getting what, you know.
Yeah, the landscape was different at the time too. It was,
Most certainly was.
many more candidates and less openings that there are right now. And that's some of the challenges that we ran into a few months ago. It's a different time, and we'll look at all the different services that are out there, and we have to obviously look at what the budgets are and what their services are. So we need to put a minimum requirement of what we need for a search firm, and then from there go into some other services that we'd like to have. And we have to go out and get bids. That's part of the process. We can't just go out and hire someone just because they're gonna provide all the services. We have to go through the process. There is costs that are involved, taxpayers pay for them, so we have to figure out what is it that we can hire for the budget that we're gonna have. We don't know that yet. We don't know what our budget is. This is what this workshop is for.
Yeah, part of the difficulty of working with a 7-person committee is we can't, unless we do it here in public, we can't talk about this. So it may seem like we're coming up with ideas as we speak, it's because we are.
We don't leave here and talk to each other. This is what you get, you know?
So I think you have a really good start there as to what you're looking for as a community or as a committee for what you would want your search firm to do. Surveys, forums, focus groups. I guess the question is, what more do we need? What else will we be looking for that search committee? And then I think, as Mr. Mueller said, then you look out and you look at cost. What's it going to cost us for those services? Like, are there some of those things that you might be able to do on your own to reduce the cost? Or what's the high priorities on those elements that you have up there that are important?
It's a good point, but what I've seen in my last experience, and it's kind of why I'd like to revisit, is it's not an a la carte type of service.
Okay, so that's
It's packaged with a bid, this is what we do, so, but I think it would bode us well to at least research firms first before we make a decision. And of course, the finance is gonna be the other crucial piece.
Exactly, that was gonna be
to
my
it.
follow-up question is, and not to put any of you on the spot, but how do you know what your budget is, where that ceiling is, and who decides that? Is that from the town level?
I think no, this all
Or
has
is
to
that
be
from
done
the
within
house?
our
Okay.
budget, yeah. We are certainly, we're saving more than $100,000 at the moment, not having a superintendent, so that may go, some of that may go towards the search firm.
And I'm sure those discussions will have to take place with Mr. Ruggiero.
Of course.
I'm sure he's prepared for that, and knowing that we had initially attempted to do it on our own in January and we're struggling, I'm sure we need to have that discussion as to what we're working with at some point.
Yep, absolutely.
I think what's gonna be really important is we know some of this, but I think we need to look at the search firms that have had really successful searches very recently, so we can go with someone that we in particular, but Ken, who's gonna be doing this work for us. And Human Resources is going to look at, will they provide the service that you've said you needed, but also who's been successful in doing some of this work in recent times. So Steve's like, Ipswich seems like it went really well, we'd like to look into that. So I think that we'll sort of tell Ken what we're thinking and then have him do some of that legwork for us.
And giving him that timeline as you're talking about as well, right? Like how long he has to do that in order for this process to go ahead as you mentioned.
Exactly.
I just add on that the school committee ultimately has ultimate authority over the entire school budget. And so the budget is ultimately what you determine it is, but it has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I was gonna say philosophically, that's true.
Right. Well, meaning that the budget is approved at town meeting, but then once the number is approved, the committee has complete authority over how to disperse the budget and maybe within collective bargaining and other factors.
That's it. All right, have we, do we have any more discussion in that regard? All right. Hearing none, so we'll ask Ken to seek RFPs from a few different organizations that have been successful in the recent past.
How soon can you get started with it?
Well, I'm gonna, it's Wednesday. Maybe you can get started by tomorrow or Friday.
Summer?
Yeah.
Would you then be interviewing them in public for?
Yes.
Interviewing the search
The
firms?
search firms, yeah. That's what you did last time, right?
I don't believe we did. It was executive session.
Not,
search
not,
firms?
no,
Or
not,
we-
no, it was public. It was public. We had 3 firms that we considered at public.
I just sort of
Julie
might,
drove that. We had 3, I think we had 3 packets.
so and I could be wrong, but what I remember is we had a subcommittee of 3 or 4 of us, where the packets, the information came in, and then we had called Mike Gilbert to come in and speak at a school committee meeting, but I don't remember having other groups besides Mike Gilbert.
We didn't
come
have
in.
other groups come in.
That's,
So,
But we did, but there was 3, I remember 3
We
three
did.
bids
but
presented
those
to
bids,
us.
but those bids were not discussed in public. I'm sorry, those companies were not discussed or interviewed at
They
school
weren't
committee.
interviewed, no.
Correct, that's,
but
I think that was
we-
the question that was asked.
Right, it went out to bid.
Yeah.
It went out to bid and that's what we got.
Right,
so how was the selection made to go with MASC?
that was done in a
It-
subcommittee,
Was it?
yes. We had a subcommittee that was made up of, I think, myself, I want to say Leslie Quick,
That's true.
and a couple of other, maybe one or 2 other people, and there was the bids came in, Julie was part of that committee. And I believe we got the bids, we talked about it at subcommittee, we decided to go with MASC, and then we invited Mike Gilbert to speak at a public hearing, but I don't believe we interviewed. And I want to make sure that, because you said we're going to interview them, if that would be something different that we didn't do last time.
If I was recruiting firm, I'd prefer not to interview in public and then not get the job.
Right, I
So-
think the
We
only,
didn't do an interview process with the firm, we did put it out to bid, and we did get, and what we did
Right.
to discuss was what each company offered us.
and that was done in subcommittee.
But but the decision to go to MASC
We had
been-
MASC come in at a public meeting and speak at a public meeting, and the decision was made, but I don't
But
believe.
yeah, that decision can only
Right.
be made at public meeting, because the board can only make the decision as a board of 7, not as a subcommittee.
We made the decision to hire them at a public meeting, but I believe
You know,
that,
on this,
and I could be wrong, but I don't remember speaking about any other groups at public meeting. And I just remember Mike Gilbert coming in and speaking at a public meeting.
All right, let me get legal advice on this from.
Yeah, that's why I want to make sure that
Yeah.
we,
All right. So ideally, we get Ken on that immediately. I'd love to form a subcommittee if that was appropriate, but I think we need to get legal advice first before we go down that road.
and I think we can get advice from MASC without having to hire them in something like this.
That's true.
So we don't have to hire them, but we can still get advice from them because
Yeah, that's what they're there for.
that's what they're there for.
So I'll call Glenn about that then. All right, and ideally, depending how quickly we can get RFPs back, I think that will really determine our next action step. Would be, as soon as we can get RFPs and decide how we can choose a search committee, that'll really set the timeline for our next meeting. Correct?
Are we, I'm sorry, forgive me, I'm a little slow. How are we doing research on firms?
So,
Is Ken
yep.
driving it?
yep, Ken's gonna reach out to several firms, get
Thank you.
RFPs. Then we have to figure out the appropriate way to choose a firm. And then once we do that, I suppose that firm has to make a presentation at a public meeting, according to what I'm hearing happened in the past. Right?
Honestly, I don't recall that piece per se, I just remember seeing bids. I do remember Mike Gilbert coming in and
And that was the
speaking to
firm
it.
that we hired.
Right, but I don't, I honestly, I'm sorry, but I know we didn't bring everybody in, and I don't even know if we even, at what point we brought Mike in. I just don't recall it at this point.
He came in a couple times. He might have been 2 or 3
Well,
times.
he is an
During the
advisor,
course,
he's,
Yeah,
he
during the
is
course,
our
he came in to advise us
field director, so.
on the process of the steps we need to take, and then eventually we ended up hiring him, but he came in and spoke and gave us advice on.
I think that's might be what I might remember, is that he did come in as a field director to offer us the advice as to how we start the search. He may have touched upon, but he didn't, it wasn't a discussion about what MASC can do for you, because we did put it out to bid, and but yeah, that's all I can.
All right, I think for this part of the agenda, for creating a timeline, I think it's going to depend on the search firm we select and how we select the search firm as far as our next action step on a meeting. Unless there's, yes?
Can I just ask a quick question? Once you have the search firm and you're looking for the selection committee or the screening committee, how do you think you'll pick those people to make sure you get, for instance, parents who have kids in kindergarten may be looking for something different from a parent who has someone in high school, to make sure you get a good range of people?
Yeah.
I think for the criteria for the screening committee, I think
Yeah.
that's something that's not here, but we probably should talk about.
And that criteria was given to us again by MASC.
So that's what I'm
Yeah.
asking, do they tell you?
They give us kind of a,
I can tell you what we did send out feelers out for interested parties. It was simply that a parent. It wasn't parents in each school or each
yeah,
grade.
it was like parents, community leaders, it was teachers, administrators. So you kind of gave us, 3 of these, and.
Right, but I'm asking you, how do you, if, say you have 25 parents that are interested, so do you interview those 25 parents? Do you have them fill out a survey?
They're picked from a hat if there's multiple
Oh, okay.
people. Because once that is sent out,
That's what I was
I mean,
asking, how are they
everyone's a
selected?
stakeholder.
Right, no, I,
But once they are picked out, there's not a lot of people when you get down to it, you can commit 3 consecutive 3-hour nights, after a
That
full
may
day.
change, I think the community's a little bit more invested than they probably were.
Excuse me? I'm sorry.
I said that may change, I think people are probably more invested now, and I think people will probably need time to.
That's fine, I'm just letting you know basically what is, we do have to, the numbers on this search committee has to be limited, but it's important to have a representative from each stakeholder piece. So that's how it was done, all inquiries came through the Roman House.
So this is a process I feel fairly familiar with, both as a professional and as a parent, okay? I understand the committee cannot deliberate outside of here, but I do feel the committee's a bit struggling, so I'm gonna offer
Please.
some insights, if I
Please do.
could. First of all, MASC has very clear guidelines about how to do a superintendent search. Superintendent hiring and firing is one of the 3 major authorities of the school committee, you know that. Forming a search committee is well within your purview under MASC guidelines. It's not in policy, I totally agree, it's under MASC. Mike Gilbert is a tremendous resource to you, and I highly encourage you to reach out to him early and often, not for the idea of running a search, but for information and guideposts about how early to get started. For those superintendents who are candidates on the market, they are looking early. And the number one thing, in my experience, that they're going to look at is your leadership profile. So what Wilmington needs, first of all, crucial, is a strong superintendent. I cannot underscore that as a parent enough from my perspective, as a parent of an elementary and a middle schooler. Okay? Secondly, timeline is crucial, but I agree with you, will be defined by the search firm. Getting the RFP going is going to be crucial at this stage now.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes,
Generally, how quickly can these firms turn around an RFP?
it depends on what you set for criteria, 30 days, 60 days, it's not gonna take longer than that. And I agree with you, you'll have a subcommittee with a scorecard that will go through that, and that's where your research on the firms will come from. Okay, my experience is it does not come through HR, but I certainly recommend school committee's recommendation on that. But that's part of the work, like if NASDAQ applies or others, okay, MASC, HYA, there are others, okay, there are many out there, some more expensive than others. But the number one thing a superintendent is going to be looking for, in my one opinion, okay, humble opinion, is the leadership profile. And it's crucial that the stakeholders of the town, both municipal and school, those who have children in the schools, used to have children in the schools, children to be in the schools, have a say through, and I heard you talk about the surveying piece, okay? That survey needs to be, in my opinion, well-developed, well-accessed, and left open for a period of time. The firm, in my opinion, should be paid to pull those results together into a leadership profile. The focus groups are an excellent idea. There are some people who will never fill out a survey for various reasons. I mean, I'm at the public library and see elders using the computer. Folks may not be using a computer. And I think we have to try and reach all parts of our community. This is a large community. This is a very desirable community. But that leadership profile is going to be crucial in a superintendent candidate deciding whether or not he or she puts their name in. From there, it's, again, well within the purview of this firm to set timeline. I think the school committee needs to think here about a general sense of timeline, not in a committal way, but do you want to be on the market, say, November? A lot of search committees, in my opinion, are out there in the late fall, okay? You may prefer to be out there in January, February, but typically superintendent searches take a period of time. And, you know, if it does not yield what you're hoping for, you might have to think about what if you need to run a second search and not running out of time in the spring and then winding up in an interim situation. So I do, as one citizen and parent, advise an earlier search than not. As a parent, I would like to see Wilmington on the market early, after Thanksgiving maybe, out there early, okay? And marketing with web, literature, and so on. And there's ways to do that. Ed Week, not just School Spring and the local pieces. This is a bedroom community of Boston. It's very desirable, and I think we have to do as much as we can to attract candidates, not just from the local pool, but even beyond. I think there are some pieces that have to be looked at. Cost for the search, cost of the salary of the superintendent. This is a very competitive Metro Boston area. And I think that's just a fact of the matter, and that may not be something that came up, or maybe it did. But I do think that's something that has to be put out on the table as part of conversation. And maybe some of those things are immovable, but I just feel like I need to say that. The search timeline, the search committee, I'm sorry for going on, but I feel strongly about these things, and that's why I came here. Should be, and I agree with someone, I respect what you're saying, it shouldn't be out of a hat. I think there should be applications made to the school committee where a reasoning and a composite profile of the applicant, for example, if my husband and I applied, you would see individually what we're trying to offer, the ages of our children, what schools, what our backgrounds are, et cetera. So you can ensure a diverse grouping, gender, ethnic, religion, whatever people choose to put forth, some won't, okay? But it is the school committee's major charge to hire the superintendent and thereby have the most diverse representative search committee possible. And that, to me, can only happen by a true application process that is then vetted, and a decision is made, some popular, some unpopular. If your decision is 13 on the committee, because you don't, and I've seen committees much larger than that, to be honest with you. Oh, for sure. But to me, a 13 is about the size of a principal committee, not a superintendent committee. I've seen as large as 20. But Mike Gilbert will give best advice on that for sure.
We had recommended that 13 last time was a little too large.
Okay, I think it depends on the community, to be honest with you, and I think Mike will give you his best view on that. And then there's a screening process, or I've always called it the search committee. It is not the committee's decision at that point to decide the candidates, but to vet those candidates and to advise the school committee. My experience is school committee does sit in on that search committee from the outset because they are the hiring agent, not to preform their decision, but to be part of that. Again, that may be different here.
Can I ask a quick question? To clarify, sitting in on the selection committee while they're interviewing candidates?
They can either sit in, or they can, Mike can advise on this, or they can be off to the side and in the room.
I was on the committee, the last one.
I'm sorry?
I was on the interview committee.
There are different ways to do it, but I guess my point is, because hiring a superintendent is one of the major 3 charges of the school committee, not being kind of on the end of that, but being at the outset of that. It's also search firms can be at the table, not as a participant, but in the room, and that's something that I would advise. That's just me. They're not going to control the process, but they're going to be in the fray and kind of guide, okay? And that will help with your timeline and kind of your guideposts and moving this right along. Same with question development, then from there, there's visiting the schools, having public interaction, open dialogue, and also open public interviews, panel style with the school committee in the evening where the public can attend 45 minutes to an hour for each candidate televised. So processes like this laid out publicly on the website for the public to see and attend and engage as they can, and also to be able to write to the school committee. School committee takes all that in over a process of weeks, and then ultimately, works with that search firm who will guide you right to the end to make the decision that you need to make, that very difficult decision. But that, thanks for allowing me to say all what I had to say.
I'm not cutting you off now.
I wasn't sure how to participate here.
This is a workshop, this is not like a regular
I
meeting.
wasn't sure if there's a public mic, but I just want to say in closing that, well, there's so much more I could say about the process because I'm very familiar with it, but I am passionate about there being a strong superintendent in Wilmington Public Schools. It is so, so critical. And it starts with the process. I feel hiring a strong firm who is experienced in doing this, I think it is well worth the dollar. Start with a weak firm or folks who may not be as experienced, it may not yield. Sometimes expensive firms don't yield the candidate either, so I'm not going to say money is always the answer. But having a strong process, a public process, and seeing those candidates who have the wherewithal to get in and see it through the process, who really love Wilmington and ultimately want to be here and grow here for the kids. I think it's entirely probable. But if my fear is if the RFP is not real clear, the firm's not strong, we don't get out early in the gate, we don't have a leadership profile. What I know about the process is check, check, check. If those steps do not happen and they falter along the way, we will not wind up with someone in the spring. The pool is not real deep.
Yeah, we know that, that's for sure.
And these are the kinds of things strong superintendents look for early out of the gate. Does the district kind of have the process together, in my humble opinion? Or are they kind of faltering and struggling? And that starts to define whether or not they're going to kind of put their toe in the water because it's a big deal for them. And again, just my humble opinion, but thank you for allowing me to speak, and I so appreciate it.
Before you sit down, can I
Yes.
ask, what is your name and which superintendent search firm do you represent?
My name is Sandra Track. I live at 69 McDonald Road. I have 2 children in the system, one in the elementary, one in the middle, and this is my husband's got. And obviously, you can tell there's a little bit of this that I do for a living, not running search firms, but I do run many interview committees at the senior level and for schools. And this process is very exciting for Wilmington and very probable. And I would love to put my name in the hat on the committee, but I'm not here just for our own 2 kids. I'm here for the kids on my street. I'm here for all kids. I'm here for the babies that I see on the 4th of July on the green. This town is phenomenal. We could do a lot more to market out there to MASS, Ed Week, Learning Forward. And I'd be happy to talk with you about ways to reach out. I think we need to get Wilmington a little more on the map in the superintendent world, and I say that respectfully. This is a market. To attract candidates, there have to be certain pieces in place. And to be honest, I was a little nervous about coming here today, but I so am hoping for this for Wilmington. So I hope something is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll call for adjournment. No, okay. All right, so we do, and I think that's a very good point about a vetting process for the selection committee. I think that's something we definitely have to consider when we get to that point.
Selection committee, selection committee.
Screening committee,
Screening committee.
search committee, whatever.
Yeah, we gotta come up with a single term.
We need a name.
Screening committee.
Give it, let it.
So, We have a very good crowd here. I don't know how many times we're gonna have a great crowd. They tend to dwindle sometimes. So I would like to open this up first to the membership and then ask for input from the audience. Discussion related to really identifying what we consider to be an ideal candidate for our next superintendent. And we have very publicly said we need somebody with
Is this a wish list?
This is like
Ideal.
classroom
Ideal
experience, admin experience. When did we start the last, 4 years ago, what month did we start that whole process?
I'm sorry?
What month did we start that whole process with our last meeting?
October.
We started in
October, we started hiring, we did the hiring the firm. We had the surveys that went out, the parent focus groups, and then the selection committee was set up sometime in January, I believe.
So we're
thereabouts.
actually ahead of schedule right now then.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
It's great. Let's stay ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think leadership is a given, a strong leadership, but I know education it plays a big role. I think, and if I say this correctly, it's not so much to me to see somebody have time in the classroom. I would like the next leader to be impassioned by teaching still. You know, it's not just classroom experience, but it's the passion for learning, the passion for mentoring, the passion for teaching that I would like to see the next candidate embody. Those two people, I mean, I could go on, but I'm gonna give to my colleagues since.
I have a quick question. You had talked about leadership profile and how important that is. Is that something that the search firm is putting together along with us, or is that something we give to the firm to put together?
I think, I was just thinking about what you're doing here, which is great. I think there's two things. One, yes, the firm is doing it, and I'll speak to that in a second. It's great that the school committee is kind of discussing amongst each other, what is our vision for a superintendent, right? I think it's important that the school committee has kind of a bold vision of what they'd like to see in a superintendent. But to your point, in the RFP, the proposal, when you lay out what you'd like for them to do, where to post, developing the leadership profile, for example. Yes, for example, my experience is, for example, when there's active surveying, focus groups, things like this, the firm in their RFP, as part of the proposal work, can develop a leadership profile that reflects the town of Wilmington in terms of what they want to see in the new Wilmington superintendent. And it would just be my one suggestion that that's what you use as the criteria for guiding decisions along the way. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess because we're talking what we want, and that to me sounds like we're putting together this leadership profile.
I would suggest that the leadership profile broadly come from the town of Wilmington,
Okay.
through these broad participatory forms of input. But to your point, that it's totally appropriate for the school committee to have dialogue about their hopes and dreams and vision for a superintendent. But as the hiring agent for the superintendent, again, as one person, I would hope that the school committee is leaning back on the leadership profile that's come from the town. Does that make sense? And that would actually be done, work that's in the RFP. So that would be something that I would love to not skip on and say do ourselves. I would like to see the firm facilitate that. I think there's a neutrality that can happen from that, and school committee can certainly be around and watching and listening, but you would be paying for somebody to do that. And they'd write a report, and that report would be published with characteristics of what she's looking for. And it would be much easier to develop questions and look for candidates aligned to that criteria. It would be much easier for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with this. I guess I'm struggling with a little chicken before the egg.
Something like that.
Yeah, something about chicken and eggs. When we hire a search firm, I'm sure they're going to be asking us what we're looking for in an ideal candidate. That's before all the data comes back from any surveys, correct?
Correct.
So that
They
they can
will
at least-
ask you, I'm really enjoying this, I get to really speak.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
get you to get up again.
They will ask you, so we'll pretend you're going with search firm X, that's not a real firm, we'll just pretend. You go with search firm X, and they're gonna ask the school committee what you're looking for, but they're also going to engage you as part, because you would have paid for it in the proposal, how to do broad stakeholder input.
Right.
Surveying is one method for that, focus grouping is another method of that. Write-in might be another method of that, and they would be paid to develop a composite report of the vision, you know, what kind of a needs assessment. This is what the stakeholders see, this is what I've seen. This is what the stakeholders see in the town of Wilmington and for the Wilmington schools. This is kind of the current state. This is what they'd like to see for the future. Here's the characteristics. Here's what the teachers say. Here's what the administration says. Here's what the municipal, you know, people go in and identify who they are. And they develop a report. Some of these reports, depending on the firm, will be more elaborate or less elaborate, depending, you know, and I would encourage through the RFP process that you look at their work and scorecard it and decide, does that fit your quality, your standard of quality? But that, to me, that upfront work is well worth it.
Right.
Because it's really going to crystallize your process as you go through. So for example, if the stakeholders in Wilmington say, we really want someone who, I'll just make it up, is, you know, very college and career oriented, I'm making it up, or digitally savvy, or what have you, then you know as a school committee, that's important to you. That's important to your, you know, that's shared with the search committee. And then that's shared with the public, and that's shared with you. So that begins to inform your questions and the lens that you look through, because the citizens have told you that. And I'm not saying reduces the burden off of you, but you then have a broad brush of what the town's looking for. So I think it's important to dialogue amongst each other, but ultimately that should come, in my opinion, from the wide surveying and involvement of the town. And that's why this timeline is so important. Get the RFP going so you have time to do this. You know, like getting this kind of broad-based input would be, if you could get the search committee on, the search firm on board in the next few months. Fall would be, I think, a great time to have those stakeholder groups when parents and school are back in session and engage them.
Right.
So then that could be developed and you could be out of the gate, say late fall, very early winter. Again, it is my hope that Wilmington will be on the market before the end of this calendar year. That may not be possible. Somebody like Mike could definitely weigh in and let you know. You know, and sometimes it's also there's just a lot of positions open as well too. So I'm all about being proactive. Anyway, is that
Appreciate it.
Good?
Thank you. Don't sit down yet.
All right, anybody else want to offer some ideas of what they are, what they consider ideal candidate? Peggy?
One of these factors, I'm not sure how to say it exactly, but I'll say, I really feel strongly, having worked with previous people, that we have to have somebody who is who the person puts himself out to be. And that has to be a trustworthy person. We have to see from the back that that person has worked really well with their, the people in the previous school system or systems. I think we can find out through their professional development what they've chosen to take for courses or whatever for professional development. I think that's important to see, what their interests are. I think it's really important that the superintendent is not threatened by the teaching staff. I feel that when you had mentioned, what was her name, sorry? What was her name?
In the back.
Sandy, thank you, Sandy. When you mentioned about the, wait a minute, I just lost it, I'm sorry. What I'm thinking is that the person needs to have, not an ego, but a sense, the sense of leadership to me is that you know, when you sit in the room with that person right away, you can tell that that person has something that has people follow the person and want to do things for the person. And you can see in all of our lives, if your boss is really decent to you and good, you do things that you don't have to do. You do the extras because you want to do it, and you don't let that overcome what you do with the kids. One of the things I think Wilmington is so lucky for and was so important, our teachers, no matter what we're going through above them, they are going, chugging right along, doing what they're supposed to be doing, what they know they should be doing, and what people are telling each other, this is where we should be going, we want to get there with the kids. And they're doing it despite the fact that we might not have a textbook here or something there. So we have to play on that, and I think we really need a superintendent who's going to be encouraging of the staff and watching where they're going and helping them get there. So I feel, of course, you could tell I was his teacher, so, but I think teachers really respond to good leadership, and it's important that we have that. And I think the other thing is that that person, I feel the person who is the superintendent has to be able to hire good staff, that is encouraging staff, that has the same kind of vision that we outlined for ourselves in Wilmington, and has to be able to push forward with the staff and allow the sometimes you get put in a position in a certain job and you're there forever because nothing comes up, you don't challenge yourself to move on or to move ahead or something, which is not a bad thing, but it's also, there aren't that many openings for people to go or to move. And so if you're not gonna be able to do that, then we have to find something that keeps your interest and works together. And so I think somebody who will cooperate with us, with the school system, and with the town, and all the people in town, and be very friendly with the police chief, with Mr. Hull, and the Board of Selectmen. Develop those relationships. Yeah, I think that's really important. So those are basically my thoughts of it.
Do you want to go there?
Sure. I have a demonstrated focus on equity and inclusion, committed to serving all students, experience and excellence in teaching, experience and demonstrated excellence as a school leader and a developer of leaders, a demonstrated ability to develop systems and frameworks to support continual growth and learning and attune to the PD needs of a district, and demonstrated excellence initiating district-wide PD, deep expertise in curriculum and instruction, knowledgeable and supportive of social and emotional development, demonstrated excellence in building strong family-school partnerships, familiar and attuned to DESE initiatives, deep knowledge of next generation MCAS, other assessments, evidence of experience forging relationships with school faculty and leaders, competence with technology, or a few of what I listed so far. And based on, this was based on what I've learned from families and telling my own experience is what I feel is most important.
Could I just not add something, but say something? When we're talking, that's what I started to say before. When we're talking about like confidence in technology, the experts in technology, I'm getting a different feeling about this whole thing, because my feeling is that they have to hire the right person in technology, but the superintendent doesn't have to be excellent or a top person in every area. He or she has to be able to hire the staff that makes her or he or she excellent and the staff excellent. Do you know what I'm saying? I think.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Tom, anything to add?
She stole all my stuff.
Ditto to all.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's, basically what everybody's saying, a passion for the job. Something like Joanne had. She had passion for the job. She loved the job. She loved the community. And to find somebody like that, that's what I think is what we should strive for. I mean, I think everything else will come into play, but if they have the passion, the love, and, to give back to the community the way that Joanne did, I think that's, will be good.
Did I skip you?
I went a different direction, but I do have one thing. I didn't feel this way before, but I feel this way now, is that I think that this person should have some experience in the classroom.
Oh, yeah.
I clap for that.
That's a
So,
given.
and I think that at some point, an educator, whether it's early in their career or recent or whatnot, but I think it's really important. I think that's one of the things we missed last time.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's one of the most important things, in my opinion. So, as well as some administrative experience as well. So I think we need a leader. We need someone with strong experience, both in and out of the classroom. And I think Tom hit in the head, passion is important as well. So
I would actually echo everything you guys said. One thing I would be looking for is experience in the role. somebody who has been a superintendent already. I mean, if the ideal candidate is not currently a superintendent, then when we look at it, but I think that's for an ideal candidate, somebody who has experience, somebody who's going to foster a collaborative culture, and somebody who, and we talked about classroom experience, you kind of touched on this, but someone who not only taught in the classroom, but was really demonstrably good at it. And rose up because they wanted to rise up, not because they didn't like to teach. And everything else kind of was covered. But, yeah, the hiring too, Peggy, that's not something that I mentioned, but that's a great point. We'd like to see somebody who has demonstrated that they make good hires. So, all right, I think this was a good start, and I'd love to hear, unless anybody's any further comment, I'd love to hear from the audience.
Add on to the education experiencing, you know, especially even teaching with kids, we can tell somebody stuff all the time, but understanding comes from experience. Understanding comes from getting hands-on and getting dirty. So Peggy talked a little bit about the trust between staff and understanding, like, strong staff isn't, you know, attacking you. It's maybe we have a strong staff because we have experience. So if we're questioning something as teachers, then that person should be able to have that understanding. So it is easier just having someone who gets it. It's even like a parent perspective. I mean, think about how you talk to your friends with kids versus your people who don't have kids. There's a different understanding, and if we're building community between parents and staff and administrators, I mean, I felt like in the past, you know, I moved to Wilmington because I taught here, and I was like, wow, I want my kids to go to school here. And then all of a sudden, things changed, and there was division. I mean, I remember feeling divided, and I don't like that feeling, and that's not what brought me to Wilmington, and that's not, you know, I think anything we can do to embrace that coming back, that understanding, listening, and, you know, I agree with the hiring and the delegating too. You don't have to be great at everything, but you should be able to support us, and that, I think, is really essential.
I think what you're speaking to, and what I'm hearing too, which I'm strong agreement with you, is that I think it's character that we're looking at, that when someone does become strong, they don't take it, you want a person who doesn't take it as a challenge, but a moment to learn and to discuss and to problem solve.
Yes.
To respect one another and work collaboratively together to come to that agreement, to come to some solution. I think that's what I ideally would like in a leader, is someone of character who's not, doesn't take the push as it being challenged, but more so as a let's explore this and work together as to how we can solve this. You know what I mean? Or whether it become a teaching experience or a mentoring experience or a broader, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think the schools individually as a whole, and we've done pretty well without leadership in a lot of different roles. So I feel like the staff knows kind of what's going on too. So someone to come in and to really lead us in a positive direction moving forward as a community, you know, thinking about all of those things. So I do really think that experience in the classroom is essential, and it's for our children too, because, you know, they need to be able to feel like they're, you know, that they need to feel that feeling the same way, you know, that teachers are invested no matter what. I agree with what Peggy said, you know, we're all doing what we're closing our doors and doing what we have to do and making sure, and that's been one of the biggest assets that Wilmington's had, is that our teachers have stayed on point. So I think having someone come in who can guide us and keep moving us forward in the right direction and not dividing and building up walls would be amazing and essential, and we should highlight that on the little thing. If you're gonna put that up on that thing, I'd highlight it. Excellent.
Yes, sir.
The most important factor in a kid's getting a great education is a great teacher. And if there was a fantastic teacher in every single classroom, we could almost all go home and just everything, the rest of it would be taken care of. And if you have a weak teacher in a classroom, then all the rest of it can really hardly make up for it. And so I think, and I'm kind of adding on to what Peggy was saying, that I think one of the most important qualities that a superintendent needs to have is the ability to implement policies and establish the kind of leadership that makes this a district that great teachers want to come to, and that the great teachers that we have want to stay in. That the people who feel supported in their craft, that there's professional development for them to develop their craft, that there are chances to collaborate with other teachers. We already have tremendous resources of fantastic teachers, and they should be able to distribute their expertise among each other and collaborate and have best practices spread throughout the district. And so I think that having a superintendent that both has that as a value as well, that nothing is more important than great teachers teaching every student in the district, and then also has the ability to attract those types of teachers and provide leadership and inspire them to want to come here. I think that's one of the most important things that we could have. And I also want to just add on to what Tom was saying about the passion, that in some ways you have to be crazy to want to be a superintendent. It's a really hard job, and you're only going to be good at it, and certainly you're only going to want to stay somewhere for a while. And I think that's another thing that we really want to make sure we have is someone who really wants to stay here for a while. And in order to do that, you have to have someone who really is just absolutely committed and passionate about the work and about wanting to make a difference in the district and provide everyone with the best education that they possibly can.
Thank you.
So I just want to say, yes, the teachers are important, but educating children is kind of like a relay race. If all three legs don't work together, it's not going to happen. And it's parents, teachers, and the leadership team. And we need a superintendent that can bring all three together and make pairs of those, all three of them work together in some way. We need a leadership team who supports teachers, teachers who support the leadership team to support parents, and likewise. We need all those relationships happening at all cylinders in order to educate the children. And when it comes down to it, I think teachers and parents feel it the most. When you're looking at the kids in your classroom or at home, you see them, you want to do what you can for it. And classroom experience is essential for that, because if you haven't been there, you haven't looked at those kids, you don't know what that's all about. So I think working the triad is important.
And I think you have a lot of us sitting here in the audience who have either grown up in town, chosen to work in town, grown up and choose to work in town and raise families. And I, for one, have been teaching a long time here in town. I've sat through many superintendents. I truly believe the approachability, being able, whether you're a parent, you're a classroom teacher, a high school student, being able to approach and be able to sit down and talk with your superintendent about your needs is also important. We've had that here, but we've also not had that here. And it comes to many of the points that have already been said: trust, good working conditions, three legs, all of that comes into play. I think Mrs. Bryson's list of qualifications for a job description are absolutely point on. However, I do think what Mrs. Kane said is really important. Someone who has classroom experience or school experience, maybe a really excellent administrator who really hasn't taught, but an administrator who gets into those classrooms on a daily basis and sees what's going on, that's key. Classroom experience is really important to me, but you may be a phenomenal administrator who's in those classrooms and sees what goes on that could also do a really great job here. And I think that's going to bring it all back together to what we've had before, where our children are thriving just district-wide because of all of those components: parents, administration, and teachers working together, as well as school committee.
So I come here as a Northside PAC board member. We talked at our last meeting in June, and we did was, we thought we would put it out to the parents. What would you like to see? So maybe June's a tough month, we all know it, everybody's away. We knew this meeting was gonna happen. So just to come up with some ideas. And I actually put it out, I think on the PAC page just this week. I put it out sooner. We got about 25 responses. So for the sake of time, I just made copies. I won't read them all. What I do is I just merged it some were duplicate comments, they all want, some of the same things, so I just put all the comments on here. I have copies for
That's great.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just, we figured as a pack, to help the cause, help the parents maybe that can't get to a meeting or maybe don't want to express their ideas in public, or, so I did, a lot of people, either emailed me or texted or Facebook or Messenger, or, so like I said, what I did was I just, some of the same qualities you had, but I just, again, just merged it all into one for you.
I appreciate it. Can we grab that before you leave?
Yes, yeah, I made a bunch of copies.
Excellent. Yes, sir.
MJ knows me, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna say what I was gonna say, but 5 years ago, and this relates to what a superintendent can do for you. 5 years ago, I met Joanne Benton, and she literally saved my son's life. My family was in incredible crisis. My son was having a lot of problems, and we had nowhere to turn in the school system. We called Joanne Benton, and she rushed us into her office to help. We told her what was going on, and I'm not going to get into details, but we told her what was going on in our life. And she sat there and listened and actually cried about what was happening. Her response was simply, whatever you need. I met her 3 times, and I can honestly say her impact on my family in those 3 times I met her is enormous. So I think that what everyone's talked about here within the superintendent having classroom experience and having all of this experience of administrative experience, sometimes it just comes down to saying to a parent, whatever you need, and having compassion when you're running into brick walls everywhere else. And I think that that's one of the qualities that she had, and I think it's probably the most important quality you can have in a superintendent. So, I mean, if you're looking for something in a superintendent, I think that's it.
That's right.
And I just want to say that I'm happy with everything I'm hearing tonight, and thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's a moving story. It's tough to follow that. Yes, sir.
I'll give it a shot. Certainly not as compelling, but, I do think that leadership is based off of relationships. So certainly someone who can forge and sustain relationships in all directions is essential. You have to honorably, authentically like and want to work with the person. I think that's an important key. I'd say for all administrators, there's a continuum of management and educational leadership. And I would just encourage us to think about pushing the lever towards educational leadership and maybe slightly away from management. The trains still have to run on time, but we need someone with a vision to move us forward. And I think you can hire strategically around the superintendent to fulfill some of those management obligations, but also to fulfill the vision that he or she holds for the district. So, just encourage us to think that way, and also consider someone with a track record and ability to move the needle on educational outcomes for the district. And then my last piece, which maybe isn't around the quality, but with that movement of the needle is going to come some change, inevitably. And I think one of the essential roles of the school committee, since you are hiring and supervising that individual, is to give them the confidence to move the needle in the school district. And that means, we're not going to be wishy-washy on our support for you. We want this, and I think you'll see that in the educational profile that comes out and what we're looking for in a superintendent. But I think along with that vision, there is going to inevitably be some change. So, citizens need to be ready for that. I think, I came from the classroom myself as a teacher, change is inevitable. But it's the way we go about it. And it gets back to that first part of leadership, is about building relationships with folks. So just encourage us to think about that as we move forward.
Anyone else?
Hi, just speaking from experience in management, when I'm putting my team together, the greatest thing I can do is communicate my needs and listen to others when they're talking to me and be able to, maybe we don't have the same vision, or maybe we see things a little bit differently, but being able to empower each other, to respect each other, and to collaborate and get to our end results or our end goal through empowerment. And I think that finding a superintendent that is able to identify the needs of our teachers and being able to work with them and empower them to have a voice is very important. And I think that the communication element is very important, to find someone who is approachable and has a track record of raising the bar and elevating our teachers to where they also want to get.
Thank you. All right. I can't thank all of you enough for coming out and giving us such great input and feedback. And I think I speak for the committee when I thank you. This is a very daunting task, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we need all the help that we can get on this. So please, this was a very different format. This is a workshop as opposed to a standard school committee meeting. So it was a great place for us to get all this type of feedback from you and input. Is there any further discussion from anyone?
I will just say that I wrote down establish and maintain mutually respectful and effective relationships, and I tallied it, and I think we were up to 7. So in comments, I think of the things I heard, that seemed to be what was the most important to us, I think, as a group. So as we move forward, we'll have to.
I think some of the things I heard, we keep talking about experience, and whether it's in the classroom or administrative, but we talked about personality traits that are important to look for, and some of the things I heard was trust, passion, compassion, and communication. So.
I'd like to just say, I think you probably don't realize how much it means to us to have you out there to help us, because we can't do it alone. I don't know about everybody else, but I wasn't sure that we'd have, how many people we'd have tonight, if we'd have anybody. It means so much to us to have your support, and feel free to, speak to any of us at any time. And please keep coming. Please keep coming and be part of this, because so much came out tonight that we never on our own. We wouldn't be able to talk about those things or know those things. So we really need your help, and we really appreciate you coming out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any committee reports? Correspondence? All right, I would entertain one more motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
First, second, all those in favor?